Coming up on New Day at Arirang, concerns continue to mount over a new COVID-19 variant, Omicron, that was first detected in South Africa, as some 12 countries already have confirmed cases of the virus. South Korean health authorities are expected to announce its revised social distancing measures later today amid a continuing rise in the number of new infections in the country. And BTS kicked off the first of 4 offline concerts this weekend in Los Angeles. Some 200,000 fans from all over the world are set to attend the 4 concerts that are expected to end on December 2nd.
Hello and welcome to this Monday edition of New Day at Arirang. It's 8 a.m. on November 29th here in Seoul, South Korea. Thank you very much for being with us. I'm Mark Broom.
And I'm Kim Ho-gan. Over the next hour, we'll take a look at the big news stories of the day and get expert insights on the issues facing Korea and the world.
We certainly will be. Our top story this morning, though, a new COVID-19 variant, Omicron, is setting off alarm bells both here in South Korea and around the world. Countries have sealed their borders in a bid to stop the strain arriving on their shores. Not much is known about it quite yet, but some experts have speculated it could be even more infectious and more resistant to the current vaccines we have than the Delta strain.
For more COVID-19 updates, we have our reporter Kim Yeon-seung in the studio with us. Welcome, Yeon-seung.
Thank you for having me.
So Yeon-seung, for starters, let's start with what is Omicron?
Well, it's this new variant of concern. South Africa just sounded the alarm on this new strain to the WHO less than a week ago after finding some of the first cases in the country earlier this month. Since then, a growing number of countries have detected the strain within their borders. Botswana, Britain, Italy, Belgium, the Netherlands, Australia, and Israel have identified cases, and many others are scrambling to update prevention guidelines to counter this new threat.
And what are the experts saying? Should we be deeply concerned about the emergence of this new variant?
Well, the thing about this variant of concern, Mark, is that it's very new, so there's so much unknown about this virus. Some say it could be more evasive to vaccine protection and more transmissible compared to other strains. Doctors in South Africa, though, reported very mild symptoms among their Omicron patients. Most suffered from fatigue and muscle pain that lasted for a few days, while none have reported the more notorious COVID-19 symptoms like the loss of smell or taste as of yet. Still, countries are on edge about this new strain seeping across their borders. U.S. top health official Anthony Fauci said that although there are no Omicron cases reported in the states as of yet, it will inevitably come and possibly spark a 5th wave of COVID. As for South Korea, the problem with this virus is that the current domestic PCR test can only identify 4 of the variant strains of COVID: Alpha, Beta, Gamma, and Delta. So South Korea currently are less prepared than they like to be ahead of any spread of this new variant among the domestic population.
But Yeon-seung, I must ask, why is this variant called Omicron?
Right, so WHO is going down the Greek alphabet to name each of their variants, and Omicron is the 15th letter of the alphabet. You know, earlier this year, I remember interviewing an expert on the emergence of the Lambda variant, which was the 10th mutant strain to be detected, and he said that eventually there are going to be so many COVID-19 variants that there are not going to be enough letters in the Greek alphabet to name them after. Now, seeing there's only 9 letters in the Greek alphabet left, his herring prediction seems like it might just come true.
Yeah, it seems that way, given the rate at which these new variants are popping up. But what are countries trying to do to stop this variant coming in to their borders?
Right, so many countries have been imposing travel bans on countries in southern Africa. The European Union has narrowed entry across its borders from 7 countries in the region, while South Korea and the U.S. have targeted travel restrictions for 8 countries. Israel enforced one of the toughest measures yet by sealing off its borders to all foreign nationals for 2 weeks after finding their first case of Omicron. These bans are simply a stopgap measure. Officials and experts reluctantly accept the fact that it's impossible to fully close off borders to Omicron, but through this travel ban, they're trying to give themselves a little more time to come up with a plan on how to deal with this new situation when it does come into the country.
Right. This new strain definitely is concerning, considering how South Korea has been grappling with rise in new cases and critically ill patients, right?
Exactly. So the situation is actually seeming quite dire right now. Health authorities are pulling out all the stops to contain the rising concerns over COVID-19. And this virus strain looks like it has the potential to thwart all of their best efforts. So South Korea's ICU beds are more than 70% full nationwide, while the number of critical cases keep hitting record highs. 647 critically ill patients reported as of Sunday. Almost 2,800 new infections were reported as of Sunday 9 p.m. The current situation may bring changes to the gradual easing of restrictions that the country is seeing now. An announcement on the possibly tweaked measures is due later today. Health authorities will also expand booster shots now to military personnel who can get their jab starting from the 27th of next month.
Right, let's just hope the situation will get better as soon as possible. Thank you so much for your report, Yun-seung. Talk to you again tomorrow.
Yes, Yun-seung, see you again same time tomorrow. Now it's time for On Point, where we speak to experts to delve that little bit deeper into the biggest news stories in the spotlight right now. And of course, it is this new variant of COVID-19. It's called the Omicron variant, detected in South Africa last week and has since spread to numerous countries, as we just reported on. The news sparked fresh fears. It caused stock markets to tank and triggered new international travel restrictions to try and limit the spread.
It's expected to take researchers some time to understand Omicron, but the WHO has already labeled it a variant of concern. Now, this means it could be more transmissible, more virulent, or more able to evade the protection granted by the vaccines we currently have. And this is all the more concerning as new cases continue to rise in South Korea, like we said, along with the number of critically ill. So officials are probing the idea of reintroducing tougher restrictions today. For more on this, we connect to Dr. Alice Tan, internist at Ms. Midi Women's Hospital in Seoul. Good morning, Dr. Tan.
Good morning.
Well, it's still early, but what do we know so far about the Omicron variant?
Well, as was reported, we don't know that much, but it was first reported by South Africa to the WHO on November 24th, but the first known confirmed case was from a sample that was collected on November 9th. So what this means is about 3 weeks have already elapsed since the first known case. What's most concerning is that there is a large number of mutations in the Omicron variant. So there are 30 mutations, 30 amino acid changes in the spike region, including 15 changes in the receptor binding domain, and also 20 mutations in other genomic regions. So 50 mutations in the entire genome that have been changed from the original Wuhan variant. And so this is very concerning indeed. And as I mentioned, already 3 weeks have passed since the first known case. And so this raises the possibility, the very high possibility that this variant has already circulated the globe widely. And we should also keep in mind that Johannesburg, which is sort of the epicenter of the growth of cases in South Africa right now, is a major international transportation hub. So that just increases worries more.
Yeah, we just heard a couple of American airlines are saying that they are going to keep their flights between South Africa and the United States open for the time being at least. So that's a concern there. As you touched upon, scientists are saying that this has a very unusual kind of mixture of mutations going on. And this may actually help it bypass our immune systems, make it more transmissible and less treatable. But like you say, a lot of unknowns at this point. Are you concerned that this strain could make the current vaccines we have completely ineffective if it becomes the dominant strain?
Well, in terms of transmissibility, let's start there. It looks like it may overcome the Delta variant. On November 8th, South Africa recorded about 117 new cases. By November 27th, that number of new daily cases was up to 3,220. That's about a 17-fold increase in 19 days. And 70% of the genetic sequencing that was done in the province surrounding Johannesburg, 70% of the cases were found to be of the Omicron variant. So it had overcome the Delta variant, essentially, in the Gauteng province. So I think that it may overcome the Delta variant worldwide. In terms of immune escape and whether or not it'll make vaccines completely ineffective, I don't think so. I think that vaccines will still offer some degree of protection against hospitalization and death, even against the Omicron variant. And so I think this is a warning call for all countries to try to get their vulnerable groups vaccinated as quickly as possible and deliver boosters as quickly as possible. But there may be some waning of immunity, vaccine-induced immunity, and that's why Pfizer and Moderna are both working on revised or updated versions of their vaccines.
And also, Dr. Tan, what steps do you think the South Korean government will take as part of its emergency response plan that will be announced in the coming hours? And what steps have already been taken to stop the Omicron variant entering the country?
Well, there's been a travel ban on 8 Southern African countries that was issued over the weekend, but we should realize that travel bans, they do not block the entry of variants, they just delay the entry. And we should also keep in mind that there are other countries in Europe, Australia, Hong Kong, for example, Israel, other countries around the world that have already reported cases of the Omicron variant. So it really doesn't make much sense to just target Southern African countries when we know that the variant is already in other countries around the world. Basically, as I said, we need to really up our game in terms of booster distribution, protect our most vulnerable groups against COVID-19, because right now that's the best defense. In addition, we have all of the non-pharmaceutical interventions that we know work, and we know that these work because they worked even before vaccines were developed. And so we really need to go back to the basics, I think, and our restrictions, social restrictions, and our distancing that we had, of course, relaxed since November 1st.
And finally, just 30 seconds, if you can. How worried are you that the number of critically ill patients in South Korea with the winter coming up is just going to completely overload South Korea's healthcare system?
The South Korean healthcare system is already under tremendous strain. ICU capacity is over 80% in the Seoul metro area. We hit 75% nationwide. And every day for the past 3-4 days, we've had more than 1,000 cases who are aged 60 and above. So ICU beds will fill up, and then we have all of the other acute respiratory illnesses that will occur over the winter. So I am very, very concerned, and I hope the government does institute some measures to prevent our healthcare system from collapsing.
All right, Dr. Tan, as always, we're so grateful for your insights, and thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you. Worrying times indeed. Now let's move on to some other news. The defense ministers of South Korea and the US will meet in Seoul this week for the 53rd security consultative meeting between the two allies.
They will be addressing security and alliance issues, with the agenda topped by the transfer of wartime operational control that Seoul has been pushing for. Kim Hyo-san tells more.
On Thursday, Seoul and Washington will hold their annual security consultative meeting in the South Korean capital. The key issue is whether the allies will advance discussions on the timing of the envisioned transfer of wartime operational control. The transfer is something the South Korean government has been pushing for, but the process, which includes a 3-stage assessment to verify Seoul's capabilities to lead wartime operations, has slowed due to various reasons, including the pandemic. A South Korean government official explained late last week that prior consultations had proceeded in a, quote, very amicable manner, unlike last year's meeting under the former Trump administration. Expressing expectations for progress, the official added that this year's meeting will approach the issue more positively. The 53rd SCM will be the last chance for the Moon Jae-in administration to make progress on regaining wartime OPCON before his term ends in May 2022, although a complete transition won't be possible by then. The allies are also likely to address ways to broaden military cooperation into wider fields, including space and cyberspace. China-related issues will also be on the agenda. Seoul's Defense Ministry also says Defense Minister Seok will explain South Korea's position on an end-of-war declaration when he sits down with his U.S. counterpart, Lloyd Austin. Kim Hye-sun, Arirang News.
China sent 27 warplanes into Taiwan's air defense buffer zone on Sunday, the latest in a series of incursions as part of Beijing's pressure campaign against the island. In response, Taiwan deployed fighter jets to warn off the Chinese aircraft as well as its missile systems for monitoring purposes. Taiwan's defense ministry said the planes flew into Taiwan's air defense identification zone close to the southern part of the island and flew out into the Pacific Ocean before returning to China. China's move to stir up tensions comes on the heels of a visit by a delegation of U.S. lawmakers to Taiwan, the second of its kind in a month.
Officials from Iran met their counterparts from Russia and China over the weekend ahead of Monday's resumption of talks on the 2015 Iran nuclear deal, according to a semi-official Iranian news agency. The Iranian team held bilateral and trilateral meetings in Vienna at the IAEA HQ as Iran appeared to seek a balance against Western powers in the talks. The report also said that the Iranian team also met with the EU's coordinator for the talks. These talks resume after a 5-month suspension imposed by Iran. Around 100 people protested in the German capital Berlin over the weekend against the removal of a statue representing the Korean victims of Japan's wartime sexual slavery. Civic groups, including a Berlin-based organization with South Korean ties called Korea Verband, demanded the Korean women's statue remain in place on the occasion of the International Day for the Elimination of Violence against Women by the UN. They say the statue warns future generations that wartime sexual violence should never happen again.
It's been 2 years since the Army saw BTS in person at one of the group's concerts, but over the weekend, the K-pop sensations were back on stage in LA in front of tens of thousands of adoring fans. Demand is so intense that BTS have 2 more dates coming up later this week. Kim Do-yeon with more.
It was a spring day on a Thanksgiving weekend as ARMY and BTS were finally reunited face-to-face at BTS' first in-person concert in 2 years. Saturday at Los Angeles SoFi Stadium marked the first day of the Permission to Dance on Stage tour.
They haven't performed in 2 years with a live audience because of COVID and the pandemic and everything, so we're very, very excited.
I'm really excited for them because I know that they've been having a lot of difficulties, and I'm excited that they get the chance to finally meet ARMY again, and I'm really excited to be able to see them for the first time.
With performances in front of 50,000 people per night, the tour is planned to run for 4 nights in total here, but fans that couldn't get hold of a ticket also showed up to celebrate outside. No need for permission to dance here. Regardless of age, background, or country of origin, fans spread their love for the group like butter. It was reported that some 8,000 dedicated fans even flew in from South Korea to attend the event.
I had to come because it's the first concert in 2 years, so I took days off from work.
Outside the stadium, fans waited in lines for hours to pick up merchandise. To enter the stadium, they had to present proof of vaccination or a negative PCR test taken within the past 3 days, making the wait to enter even longer. This tour signals K-pop's return to the stage as life goes on, finally after these large concerts were halted around the globe. Similar dynamite performances are also in the pipeline for K-pop groups such as Monsta X and Twice as they plan to host in-person shows around the world in the coming months. Kim Do-young, Arirang News.
South Korea's Choi Min-jung has won her first individual gold medal of the season at the Short Track World Cup in the Netherlands. Her victory in the 1,000-meter final on Sunday came after she won a silver at the third World Cup event of the season after returning from injury. South Korea finished the season's fourth World Cup event of the season with 3 golds and 1 bronze. Lee Yoo-bin finished first in the 1,500 meters and Park Jang-hyuk third in the men's 1,500 meters. The men's team also won gold in the 5,000-meter relay, claiming their first team gold of the season.
South Korea's exports of agricultural and fisheries goods have this year exceeded $10 billion for the first time ever, thanks in large part to the spread of the Korean wave of pop culture, according to the Ministry of Agriculture, Food and Rural Affairs on Sunday. Outbound shipments amounted to $10.1 billion between January 1st to November 25th. That's up 16% from the year before. Seaweed products were the top export item, with kimchi and ginseng remaining popular in the US, Japan and Southeast Asia. Online Black Friday sales dropped for the first time this year as consumers scooped up deals earlier in the holiday season. According to Adobe Analytics, sales came to around $8.9 billion. Last year's record of $9 billion was more than 21% higher than the previous year. Adobe Analytics said people spent their money earlier due to many promotions and deals starting in October. Experts also note that consumers were rather strategic in their gift shopping this year, making sure they got their goods in time, considering the ongoing global supply chain crisis. And now it's time to pass it over to our Oh Soo-young for global insight and an in-depth look at important developments in world affairs.
Thank you very much, Mark. It is indeed time for Global Insight, where we speak to experts from around the world on issues making headlines. Well, the cost of fuel has been making news all around the world for weeks now as petrol and diesel prices hit multi-year highs amid tight supply. And in response, a number of oil-consuming nations have decided last week to release oil from their strategic petroleum reserves in order to lower the high gasoline prices. South Korea, the United States, United Kingdom, India and Japan are among these countries. But the question is, will the move be effective? For this, we are joined by Melvin Matthews, advisor to Orbit MI, and Jeffrey Halley, senior market analyst for the Asia-Pacific region for Oanda, who is based in Jakarta. Very warm welcome to you both. And, well, we've got a lot of questions today. And let's start with you, Melvin. Now, first of all, why have consumers been seeing this significant rise in retail petrol and diesel prices?
Good morning, Soo-young. To understand the significant rise of petrol and diesel, we have to first understand how crude oil has performed since the pandemic. Now, early travel restrictions due to COVID-19 brought to a standstill almost all modes of transportation, with flights grounded and people not traveling to work. The consumption of petrol and diesel has drastically reduced. This has perhaps been the main reason that the WTI crude oil prices went into negative territory in April 2020. Now, the global crude oil prices have been increasing after the Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries, or OPEC Plus, has decided to continue supply curbs. And around this time last year, crude oil prices were around $45 a barrel. And since then, it's been steadily rising to over $65 a barrel in March this year, and followed by $75 a barrel in July this year. And the latest earlier this month in November, about $85 a barrel. Since then, crude oil prices have tapered off to trade at just below $70 a barrel. This naturally has had a knock-on effect on higher retail and petrol, diesel prices at fuel pumps and gas stations. So wait to be seen what's next.
Well, Jeffrey, the White House has said that anticipation of the reserve tapping move has already helped bring down oil prices about 10% during the past few weeks. Would you agree with that? Do you think this SPR release is going to bring down the retail pump prices down in the short run?
I think there was a bit of a politicking in that statement. In fact, oil prices rallied by 5% when Mr. Biden actually announced the SPR, mostly because he had telegraphed the move to the market. Now, President Biden's actually limited by legislation to about 60 million barrels. He can only release more from the SPR after that if there is a serious blockage in the delivery of oil worldwide. We don't have that problem in the world. Oil is still flowing, it's still being delivered, it's just that it's costing more. So he's pretty much used most of his discretionary allocation already. I believe that most of the price falls, in fact, are due to last Friday's announcement about the Omicron announcement. We saw oil collapse by 10%. It's got nothing to do with the SPR. Also, the SPR itself, the release is more of a one-shot hit. So there won't be follow-on releases after this. So I'm expecting the SPR impact to be quite limited.
And Jeffrey, how do you expect the release to impact South Korea, where fuel prices have already been substantially cut due to lowering of taxes on fuel?
I actually believe that the fuel tax cut will have a more profound effect in the longer term than actually one-off strategic petroleum reserve releases. So I think the government's being very proactive in that, and it was a good policy to help with the South Korean domestic consumption recovery. But the SPR releases are more of a signal, I think, rather than a structural change in the market. What will be interesting now is, do oil prices remain low because of this new COVID-19 variant, or will they quickly resume? And I think there's a very binary outcome there.
And Melvin, would you agree with that? Would you agree that the recent lowering of oil prices over the weekend, it's been down more to due more to the new variant rather than the SPR release?
Yeah, I think Jeffrey's quite right there. The sentiment is more driven by Omicron and how that's going to pan out. Are there going to be lockdowns and quarantines and travel restrictions? I think the SPR is more of a political signaling to the OPEC Plus, and will have, if at all any impact, it'll be very, very short term.
And Jeffrey, well, it seems that this political signalling is quite important, especially in geopolitics. And well, South Korea and Japan, they're among the countries that are joining the US in releasing oil from strategic reserves. What's the significance of this coordinated SPR release between multiple countries?
Well, it's one grouping against the other. We've got OPEC Plus with all the world's largest oil producers, except for the United States, whose production has actually hit 11.5 million barrels per day at the moment, yet oil prices are still going up. And then we've got the world's largest oil consumers and importers in another group. So it's almost a signal of a buyer's strike. Whether OPEC Plus chooses to take that bait or not is yet to be seen. I think what they're trying to signal to OPEC Plus is maybe relations in the future. If they want to keep relations steady with their largest customers, then OPEC Plus needs to do more to manage oil prices. Now, whether OPEC Plus is going to listen to that is another question altogether.
Right, and Jeffrey, certainly OPEC Plus has been resisting calls to ramp up production, although they do have spare capacity, of course. Do you think, well, its members, they also say that there's likely going to be a surplus next year, and now it seems that their fears are maybe being confirmed by the recent surge of the new COVID-19 variant. What kind of discussions do you think are going to come about in their meeting later this week when it happens? Of course, this was postponed due to the surge of the new variant.
Well, there's a few things going on here. Iran and the other overseas powers are returning to the negotiating table. Iran has already signaled that it's looking to raise production to 5 million barrels per day if they get a good result from those negotiations. That will change the supply-demand equation, notably in the world. We've got this Omicron variant which swept the world. This huge panic sell-off on Friday. I believe that the balance is now swung to OPEC Plus being more cautious here, and perhaps they'll put a pause on their scheduled 400,000 barrel per day increase when it's combined with the SPR releases as well, because we've seen oil come off well over 10% in the last couple of sessions. OPEC have actually been predicting there would be a surplus next year anyway. That's not in line with other forecasts around the market. So they've been rather more sanguine than other groupings or research houses about oil's consumption levels. But I do believe this week that it's now bigger than 50-50, that they'll pause and they'll wait and see what happens with this new variant, because they have signaled in the past, just about at every meeting, that the the COVID-19 was their biggest risk point, and that a return of a new variant could lead to an oil surplus due to the consumption side falling. So that's exactly what looks like is going to happen.
And Melvin, how do you see this? What kind of decision do you think OPEC Plus is going to make in their meeting this week when it happens, and how's that going to affect global consumers?
Well, OPEC has not made much money during the pandemic because the fuel prices were really low. But at the moment, the situation is quite dynamic. And for any analyst to make any reasonable forecast is not easy. I believe the OPEC might take a wait and watch approach to monitor the impact of the SPR release, because we must remember that the total strategic reserves of the OECD countries is about 1.5 billion barrels, and I don't believe that they're going to release all of that. But I do know that there were reserves that were put in place when the prices were low. But I think Jeffrey is right that the major impact that they're going to be watching out for over the next few weeks, at least, is how Omicron is going to pan out and what sort of restrictions will be put in place based on that, because then that will impact how global trade and transportation will be affected.
And indeed, while global oil prices did fall on Friday due to concerns over the new variant, and well, Melvin, do you think that we're going to continue to see a downward trend in oil prices?
Well, I wish I had a crystal ball, but I think this is a difficult thing to predict. But I think in general, winter months see a spike in rates. But as the winter eases off, there will be lowering rates, is my expectation.
And how about you, Jeffrey? What's your outlook for the global oil prices? Do you think they're going to stabilize, or do you think they'll remain high or possibly get higher in 2022?
I think it's very much a binary outcome here. If this new variant of COVID-19 is as serious or more serious than Delta, and we see sweeping restrictions reimposed around the world, and governments after the Delta failure do look like they are shooting first and asking questions later, then that will impact materially on oil consumption and demand, and we'll see prices fall. Conversely, if we move past this new variant and it's not as serious as first thought, then I believe that the global recovery will quickly get back on track. That will increase oil demand, and oil demand will increase over winter as well. I think if we have a cold winter, given the elevated state of coal and natural gas prices, in that case, I think we're going to see Brent crude move back above $90 into 2022, but very much a binary outcome. At the moment, we're going to have to wait and see what goes on with this new variant of COVID-19.
Finally, before we go, Jeffrey, now for the Asia-Pacific region, where many countries are very trade dependent, how do you forecast recovery in this area? I mean, especially with this new variant, prompting fears in the region.
Well, much of Southeast Asia is still emerging, so they've been lagging Europe, they've been lagging China, they've been lagging North America in the recovery, mostly because of their very low or slow start to vaccination. So domestic demand is quite fragile in most of Asia at the moment. A new COVID wave leading to these global shutdowns and impacting global trade would be quite a strong headwind for Asian markets into the first quarter of next year. But again, we need to see how this evolves in order to make that call conclusively.
Well, I'm afraid we'll have to end the discussion here today. That was Melvin Matthews, advisor to Orbit MI, and Jeffrey Halley, senior market analyst for the Asia Pacific for Armando, who is based in Jakarta. Thank you both so much for your time today.
Thank you, Soo-young.
Young South Koreans in the so-called Generation MZ are becoming a key driving force for the economy, but more and more of them are quitting their jobs. Our Shin Yeun went out to find out why.
Generation MZ, a common term used in South Korea that combines millennials and those in Generation Z. In other words, those born from the 1980s to 2010s. Most are in their 20s and 30s, meaning they make up a big portion of the workforce. But many of them have reported to quit their jobs within a year. According to a survey by recruitment portal site Job Korea, more than 75% of those asked had experience of changing their full-time jobs. 3 out of 10 were found to have quit their jobs less than a year after starting them. Most said that the excessive workload meant they didn't have enough free time. As an MZer myself, I gathered a few more young people from different backgrounds to ask one common question: what makes working so hard? One person I asked said having no life outside of work was what pushed her to quit.
There was no time to invest in myself. I was like a machine. Getting up in the morning, going to work, I had lost my identity. That's why I don't regret quitting my job.
Instead, she has decided to pursue a master's degree. As of now, she hopes to concentrate on her studies. Others who changed jobs said they couldn't stand feeling useless.
It's important for me to be able to pitch my ideas freely and communicate even with the higher-ups.
I decided to quit my job when I felt like I've tried everything. As soon as I felt unproductive and had learned everything from there, I left.
I always wondered whether my work contributed to the company, whether anyone would notice if I went missing for a day. Whenever I felt like my performance could be replaced or neglected, I had the urge of quitting.
He said this problem could partly stem from Korea's recruitment process.
I think many, including myself, just applied to as many companies as possible to increase their chances of getting a job interview. After tweaking CV after CV to the taste of each company, I wondered if I even wanted to join that company in the first place.
Many in the room agreed, saying they too had applied for jobs, just so they didn't have any gaps on their resume. They agreed it's hard to find the perfect workplace.
As a person who has launched a startup and recruited employees, I found job searching to be similar to dating. It's very difficult, even impossible, to find your perfect match.
A psychology professor explained that what these people had mentioned was a common trend found in MZers.
Born into a digital era, MZers have access to so much information. They compare their situation with others. If someone on the internet looks happier at his or her workplace, MZers not only feel deprived, but are intrigued to find out more about that place. That's why many frequently change jobs.
She added, MZers have a distinctive trait.
MZers prioritize themselves. They're very individualistic because they were born when the economy was booming and most households only had 1 or 2 children. From a young age, their parents concentrated solely on them. Naturally, they grew up doing what they wanted. As adults, they now prioritize their quality of life over work.
This is different from the previous generation.
As a member of Generation X, I feel very different from MZers. Our generation tends to not take action when it seems too risky or unfamiliar, but MZers are down for a challenge.
Companies have had no choice but to accommodate this trait. A recruiting manager from a major company who was asked to remain anonymous explained this is because MZers make up a big portion of the workforce. He said it costs companies a lot to educate new employees who end up leaving on average within 3 years.
We asked MZers who wanted to quit so soon why. They said they felt unproductive, the tasks assigned to them weren't interesting. So we decided to allow people to experience different tasks at different departments.
Other companies have decided to respond to MZers who demanded a good work-life balance.
So we've implemented flex time and also operate on early off work during the birthdays and quarter off work so that they can use their time and vacation freely.
Companies have also introduced workations. It's a regular workday for me. I'm writing a news article, but in front of me is a beautiful ocean view. And that's because I'm on workation, a combination of work and vacation. During my workation, I asked fellow MZers whether they appreciated this type of incentive.
I wanted to work outside my house and the office. I'm glad that I can work in such a beautiful place.
Workation is one way I can enjoy life. I have many identities. One of them is me when I'm working. Another is me outside of work. I think workation allows me to balance both of these identities.
1, 2, 3. MZers I talk to prioritize their personal life after work. That's why some have been using their spare time to learn a new hobby, like K-pop dancing. I came right after work to take a class and learn a few moves myself. Dancing to K-pop might seem even more exhausting than working overtime in the office. But these dancers said it's what helps get them up in the morning.
It's refreshing. Just by listening to the music and dancing, I feel healed, especially because I'm moving around after sitting all day in the office.
I get to meet new people, socialize, take videos of myself dancing. I recommend more people to come after work.
An economics professor says Generation MZ's preference for quality time outside of work has created a new economic trend.
Older generations didn't have as many channels to spend their money apart from basic necessities. But MZers have so many places to consume. In that sense, MZers are actually contributing to the economy by spending money outside of work.
But will MZers ever settle down at one company if it ensures a good balance between their work and personal time? It turns out work to MZers isn't limited to time.
Work-life balance should be kept, but that doesn't mean I would like to stay at the workplace forever. I might have a different job description I'm interested in later on.
I think our generation doesn't want to work at one place forever. Our occupations may stay the same, but where we work will differ based on which skill set we want to develop.
I don't want to be tied down to one place for the rest of my life. I want to keep discovering what I'm good at and what I like. There shouldn't be an eternal workplace.
So this trend of changing jobs frequently could be here to stay. 신예은, Arirang News.
Now, a broken or cracked smartphone screen can be a real pain in the neck and often costs a small fortune to fix. Since it's a common problem that has affected most of us, at least one point in our lives, researchers in South Korea have developed a new type of display film that allows smartphone screens to essentially heal themselves. Jo Sang-min with the details.
Researchers in South Korea recently developed a type of display film for cell phones that can be repaired using only heat. Thinner than a single strand of hair, the film can be applied to cell phone screens to protect them from cracks and other forms of damage. But to drastically enhance its transparency and sturdiness, researchers added synthetic sulfur particles to this special polymer film. And if it gets scratched or damaged, it takes only 10 minutes to repair when exposing it to a normal hairdryer.
It has self-healing abilities from physical damage. The fact that heat can repair it allows users to use it as if it's new every time.
Industry insiders believe that once the film is fully commercialized, it could reduce nearly half the current number of smartphones being brought in for repair. The film is also expected to serve as a crucial material for some high-tech industries. Developers claim it can be applied to space projectiles or satellites to provide a self-healing barrier against extreme extraterrestrial conditions. But for now, development is still at a rudimentary level, as researchers are currently figuring out how to make the film bendable for it to be used on foldable smartphones. 조성민, 아리랑 뉴스.
Let's take a look at what's going on in the world now. A massive 7.5 magnitude earthquake shook the remote Amazon region of northern Peru on Sunday, with tremors being felt as far away as Lima. While the earthquake caused damage to homes near the epicenter, no casualties have been reported. Some residents left their homes as a precaution, while local news reports showed houses and buildings destroyed during the quake. According to the National Institute of Civil Defense, a total of 220 homes were affected, with 81 uninhabitable, while 75 were completely destroyed. 7 places of religious worship, including a 400-year-old church, were damaged. Peruvian President Pedro Castillo says he has ordered the immediate deployment of support personnel as he headed to the impacted regions via a military plane. Fashion's highest-profile black designer and the man behind some of the more renowned men's Louis Vuitton collection, Virgil Abloh, died at the age of 41 on Sunday. According to the French luxury goods giant, Abloh had been battling cancer privately for years. Abloh was also the designer behind the ever-so-popular Off-White brand, which LVMH bought a 60% stake in. His style allowed for a mix between streetwear and high-end fashion, with his influence including graffiti art, hip-hop, and skateboard culture. This past July, LVMH expanded his role with the company, giving him a mandate to launch new brands and partner with existing ones in a variety of sectors beyond just fashion. The American fashion designer also worked as a DJ and a visual artist, and had been with Louis Vuitton since March 2018. A heavy snowstorm in northern Spain over the weekend resulted in road closures as truck drivers were left stranded. According to Spain's traffic authorities, 139 roads across northern Spain were affected by the storm. Some truck drivers were stranded for at least 15 hours at a service station, unable to move.
Around 15 hours I have been stranded. 15 hours. And I don't know, it all depends on the weather. We may have to stay the entire day here.
Spain's transport minister said Saturday that 847 snowplows were operating and over 156,000 tons of sodium chloride and sea salt were on hand to battle the snowfall on roads and highways. However, the slow rollout of assistance may leave truck drivers stranded further until the roads are cleared. 이승재, Arirang News.
Hello, I'm Kelly Park with your weather update. Now, today we'll be expecting partial to overcast skies across the nation with no significant cold, showing comfortable temperatures mostly above the freezing point. Now, the stagnant air conditions over in the west central regions will be boosting up the ultrafine dust levels to bad in the area, while extreme dry weather advisory is still in effect along the east coastal region, so please be careful with anything that can cause fire. Now, daytime highs will mostly linger in the teens as Seoul hits 12, Daegu 15, and Gwangju at 16 degrees Celsius, showing warm temperatures. But do remember the drastic temperature gap between day and night. Now, the weather will be pretty much unstable for this week as rain or snow is forecast nationwide for tomorrow. Now, with that, here are the weather conditions around the world.
And that's all we have for now, but we'll be back at 8 a.m. Korea time Tuesday for our next edition of New Day at Arirang. We appreciate you tuning in. I'm Kim Mo-kyun.
Yes, thank you for joining us. We'll be back all week at this time at 8 a.m. is when we start. And I'll be back without Mo-kyun, unless she wants to join me, at 10 a.m. Korea time for our next newscast. So until then, goodbye.